Happy Wednesday, everybody.
Yes, happy Wednesday. Before we get started, for those who don't know me, my name is Brianna. I'm the Outreach, Engagement, and Membership Coordinator here at IJ, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'll pass it to Adriana to also introduce herself.
All right. Good afternoon. I almost said, not afternoon, good evening. I almost said good morning. But good afternoon, good evening, and good night. My name is Adriana Griffith. For those of you who may not know me, I do see some familiar names. So welcome in. I'm happy that you all have been able to join us for this Wednesday evening. Really excited about tonight's meeting and tonight's topic. I will let sort of Brianna take the lead and sort of introducing all of that. But happy to be in space with everybody. And yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Brianna.
Thank you. Also, folks, just to let you know that this call is being recorded. So we just ask for you to stay on mute to avoid any background noise and to use the chat box throughout tonight's meeting if you have any questions or comments. But we'll also have time where you will come off of mute. But throughout the time where we're speaking, just feel free to use the chat box. And then for those joining us first time, welcome. We're excited to have you here. Make sure you sign up to become an official member of IJ using the tiny URL that Adriana just dropped in the chat. From here, you can receive your monthly updates, official announcements, quarterly newsletters, and all of that fun stuff. And also just a reminder for those who have just joined to just stay muted unless invited to come off mute. This just helps avoid the background noise. And also feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself and let us know where you're zooming in from. And for first timers, feel free to let us know how you heard about us. All right, before we get started, I just kind of want to go over what we're going to be doing tonight, what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to go over we're going to do a grounding exercise. And then followed by the grounding exercise, we're going to hear just a few brief organizational updates. And then the bulk of tonight's meeting is honoring Second Chance Month. So we're going to be having just a nice community discussion around that and re-entry. So we're super excited to have you all in space tonight to discuss this. So to start off the grounding, tonight's grounding exercise is going to be led by the amazing Oka from the Heart Center. Welcome back, Oka, and thank you so much for being here in space with us tonight. We're super excited to have you. Very grateful for you to be guiding this activity. So to kick off this grounding exercise, without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Oka to get us started. And folks, if you want to go off of camera while you're doing this, whatever feels comfortable, feel free to do so.
Thank you, Brianna. Hi, everyone. I'm grateful, very grateful to be here in community. We'll take a few minutes to just ground. And from my own experience, meditation isn't really about not having thoughts. It's about just letting the thought, inviting in the thoughts, the sounds, any physical sensations that come up, allowing it to be a part of your process or experience. And so we have about 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot. And so kind of being a witness or an observer of what's happening between the ears, behind the eyes. So I invite you to get comfy and cozy. I'm going to play some music in the background. Get big, so stretch out your arms if you feel called. Maybe you round your spine and arch your spine as we gently come back into space, into community. Thank you all for your time and your energy. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you so much, Oka. Okay, while we let folks come back to this space, I'm just going to take a little bit of time to provide some organizational updates as well. The first being, we're super excited. We have a IJ community event coming up in May, Saturday, May 11th. We're going to be hosting a Mother's Day brunch in LA County to celebrate and honor mothers who have been impacted by incarceration. The event will be free, and the RSVP information will be dropped in the chat by Adriana. We're still working on some details as well, so please be sure to sign up to our mailing list through the Tiny URL so you can receive updates as well. But we're also going to be sharing them in space. But to stay up to date, please be sure to RSVP and also to sign up for the mailing list. And then the next, thank you, Adriana. The next update is with our inside membership team. So they are currently working on updating our lists for re-entry resources for folks who are coming home from incarceration. And we'd love to have you all help from your communities to identify some resources that you may be aware of that we may not know as well, that can be beneficial during someone's re-entry journey. So if you're interested in supporting our team and helping to build out that list, please reach out to Ephraim. We'll drop his email in the chat for more information. And then with that, I'm going to pass it to Adriana to share some of the other updates.
Awesome. Thank you, Brianna. And I'm also seeing some stuff in the chat from Maria. And so she said that her loved one is coming home in August. So super exciting. It's not that far away. So welcome home early to them. And also that you would love to assist. So Maria, definitely what I dropped in the chat, reach out to Ephraim, Ephraim at initiatejustice.org. And he'll give you a little bit more information as to how you can support that team building out the resource list. So thank you so much. And for anybody else that is interested, definitely feel free to reach out to Ephraim as well. So I am just going to give some brief maybe not brief, but a couple of really important updates. One is super, super important. And then the other one is just sort of like FYI. And so one from our policy department. And so first, I want to share some really, really good news is that we recently had two of our co-sponsored bills heard in Assembly Public Safety yesterday. So Tuesday, yesterday, we had two of our bills, AB 2883, which is all about restorative justice confidentiality. That passed the Public Safety Committee on consent, which essentially means that there was no testimony. Everybody voted in support of the bill that sat on the committee, and so it made it through with unanimous support, as well as our other bill, AB 2483 by Assemblymember Ting, which is all about resentencing procedures. And so that also passed Assembly Public Safety Committee with flying colors, with bipartisan support and unanimous support. So really, really good news for us on the policy side of things. So we're really excited to see that move forward. If you follow us on social media, you may have seen our graphics already that announce like, hey, these bills have passed and these are the next steps. So follow us on social media, sign up for our mailing list so you can receive those updates and things like that so you don't miss a beat when it comes to like what our bills are doing. So those are two really, really good bills. There's another Public Safety Committee hearing on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday on the 9th. None of our bills are being scheduled to be heard, but there's still a lot of really good bills and a lot of really bad bills that are being heard and that are making through the legislative process right now. So I definitely encourage folks to tune in, follow along, be informed so you can know what's happening at the state level because it affects you too. So really, really good stuff coming out of Public Safety Committee in terms of IJ bills. Any questions on either of those two before I move on? Seeing none, perfect. And then this other policy update, we do have an announcement, and it is a little bittersweet. It is some sad news. So for those of you who have been with Initiate Justice or following us for a very long time, so you may know our policy director, who's Greg Fidel. And so after nearly 6 years working with Initiate Justice, starting as an intern and a volunteer back in 2019, Greg has decided to move on in his career onto bigger things and is no longer with Initiate Justice, unfortunately. And so it's very, very bittersweet. We love Greg. He has done so much for Initiate Justice, our community, but we wish him all of the best. We all got to share some well wishes with Greg before his last day, which was last week. And so we are going to be missing him. But we do want to communicate to you all that our policy campaigns are still moving forward. We have all kind of stepped in to help out in the interim. So our policy campaigns are moving forward. So that's not changing. Nothing's stopping with policy. Everything is going to keep going as if nothing's changed. But we wanted to let you, our community, know of this huge change that has impacted us internally and will most likely also be felt within the community as well, because you won't be seeing Greg as much anymore, even on like our Instagram lives and things like that. You'll see other team members. So just wanted to bring that to the community to let folks know. And again, we are all stepping in the interim. So right now, our policy stuff is being led by myself, our executive director, Antoinette, our community advocacy manager, our inside organizing manager, Lee, as well as our lobbying consultant, Danica. So we're all up in the coalition spaces, we're doing the bill stuff. And so really want to just, again, encourage and let folks know that our policy campaigns are still moving forward. That's not changing, but we'll miss Greg. Any questions, thoughts, like, oh my gosh, what's going on, that folks are feeling right now? Whoever gets him, very lucky. Yes, very, very lucky. He is going on to, I forget, he shared the name of it and I forget the name, but he's going on to a very, very well-established organization, a lot bigger than Initiate Justice for sure. So it is going to be a definite change for him, but something that's going to continue to help him grow and to still really change and impact the world. So he'll still be doing the same work, just in a different space. So we wish him all of the best. And last but not least on our updates, as far as our organizational updates, just want to share really quick on the outside organizing side. So if you are a graduate of the Institute of Impacted Leaders, I see a couple of folks here, but if you are a graduate of the Institute of Impacted Leaders, you may have missed the emails, but we now have a Facebook alumni group. So this group is specifically for alumni who have graduated from the Institute of Impacted Leaders, for folks to continue to build together after graduation, network with other alumni throughout the state, etc. So if you're an alum of the Institute of Impacted Leaders and you're on Facebook, reach out to me, and I'll make sure that you get added to that group. And I will drop that information into the chat right now for folks. And again, this is only for folks who have graduated Institute of Impacted Leaders. And for folks who are interested in joining Institute of Impacted Leaders, stay tuned. We will have more announcements on the future cohorts for this summer very, very soon. So stay tuned on that. That is all for our organizational updates. We do have one more update. It's for our committee update, but any questions on policy, Mother's Day events, helping with outreach, or excuse me, resource list, anything at all? Awesome. All right, good stuff. So seeing none, gonna keep this train moving. And just really quick on the committee update, I do see some folks who popped in to that last week. So thank y'all for showing up. But wanted to let folks know that we were able to host our Community Action Committee last week on March 27th. And we really began having a discussion with folks on the importance of regional advocacy when it comes to passing statewide legislation. So this was a really, really nice discussion. Members were able and had the opportunity to share with us like the most important issues that they are seeing in their communities and how it relates back to incarceration. So we were able to identify various different issues all at the intersection of incarceration. So anything from homelessness to financial instability to even all the way into community violence. And so that was also a huge issue. And so a lot of these things, again, are at the intersections of incarceration. So we are going to be continuing to have these discussions in our committee meeting space as we connect regional advocacy to state advocacy, where we can continue to build together. And these conversations are really critical because what it allows us to do, it allows us to take all of the insight, all of the information from you, our community, and feed it over into our policy team, right, as they generate different bill ideas and things like that. So these conversations are really, really helpful. So encourage everybody, join us at our next committee meeting, Wednesday, April 24th. Thank you, Brianna, for dropping it into the chat as we continue that discussion. So sign up. It is at 5:30 p.m. It's only an hour, so it's 5:30 to 6:30 on the fourth Wednesday of the month. Any questions before I pass it back to Brianna? Seeing none, all right, I'll pass it back to you, Brianna.
Awesome. Thank you, Adriana. Okay, so to get us started kind of in the bulk of tonight's meeting, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Second Chance Month. April is Second Chance Month, which is just a really important time to recognize the importance of helping individuals, communities, and agencies across the country to really appreciate their role in supporting the safe and successful re-entry of millions of people returning from incarceration each year. It's taking place every April, and with approximately 1 in 3 adults having a criminal record, they're facing way too many obstacles and limitations as it relates to access of education, jobs, housing, and other things that they really need to reach their full potential. So we just really want to engage in this discussion with you all tonight and just kind of learn more about the impact of reentry, some ways that we can improve reentry, and just have this open dialogue with each other. But before we kind of dive into that, I guess we could do a little icebreaker to kind of just get everyone comfortable in this space. So feel free to use the chat or come off of mute. I'm not sure if it's better to do it like popcorn style or just all.
It might be better, because we don't want to force folks if they don't want to come off mute.
Yeah, right.
Like maybe some, they might be in a driving or something like that. So we want folks to be safe. You might be engaged in other activities or something like that. So definitely feel free to utilize the chat or come off mute if you are able to. But I think the icebreaker question is, what is your name and what are you grateful for today? And I think, again, and I can add to a little bit of what Brianna was talking about and just getting us more comfortable, is we are a community, but I feel like the last few months and even the end of last year, we have been coming at y'all with a lot of information. Information this. Initiate Justice has gone through a lot of transitions, a lot of changes in the last couple of years. We've had new staff, we've had some old staff leave. And so we haven't really had the chance to actually just come together as a community and just talk. So there's no guest speaker today. It's just us, but we want to start with just chatting. What are you grateful for today? And I think I can model this. There's also a second question. So if you or somebody you know is recently celebrating or will be celebrating a freedom anniversary, let us know in the chat. We want to know those things. It's Reentry Awareness Month, it's Second Chance Month, so we want to uplift those things. But I can model this, which is my name, again, Adriana, and I am just really grateful for my freedom today. I celebrated 9 years of being free in January, and so January 14th is my freedom anniversary. And so it was so nice because I had it off and we didn't have to work and I didn't have to worry about nothing. But I really enjoy celebrating that day for myself. So I go out and I always do something very, very special for that day. But that's what I'm grateful for today. And I think always, just since coming home and being impacted, I'm just grateful for freedom. So we encourage folks, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the check-in and break and all that. But we encourage folks to unmute, raise your hands. We'll invite you off mute to share. And then we'll spend about 5 minutes on this and then move on. But Mireya, I see your hand, so go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to come on and say hello. I'm thankful for being in this space, but I'm thankful that I will have made it to my 40th birthday on Saturday and get to celebrate that in Cabo. So this is my last meeting before I check out for the week. But it feels good to be in space with everyone.
Thank you, and happy birthday early.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Do y'all hear an echo? No, okay, it's gone. There was an echo. That was weird. But congratulations and happy early birthday. That's amazing. Anybody else celebrating birthdays or just want to share what they're grateful for? No pressure. Absolutely no pressure.
Happy birthday. And wow, you look beautiful. 40, that's amazing. Inspiring. I am really grateful for creating and trusting. The Heart Center just had their first team retreat in Big Bear. The space and the food was gifted to us and sponsored to us. So I'm just like coming back from that feeling really fired up. And yeah, lots is on my list, but I'm really grateful for all of it that's in front of me.
Nice. I realized I totally like skipped you, Brianna. Do you want to share what you are grateful for? Answer the check-in question. You don't have to, but I realized I like stepped in front of you and I'm like, oh my
No,
gosh.
that's totally fine. I always like take a second with these questions because like I have a laundry list of what I'm grateful for. So like trying to pinpoint it. Um, but right now I'm just like grateful for my home and being able to be free and engage in this work, like have so much meaning in this work and purpose. And I'm just like grateful to share that with my colleagues and also just the community. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. Thank you to those who are sharing and also those that drop something in the chat. Really, really appreciate and celebrate all the things that you are also grateful for. Feel free to continue to share in the chat and uplift what you are grateful for. Life, ability to work. Yes, I love that. Not sometimes, all the time. I complain all the time because I'm like, I don't want to work. I don't want to work. I don't believe we should be working the way that we're working. But some people really do not have the ability to work and they legit want to. And so sometimes I'm like, check your privilege, Adriana, because there's somebody that really, really wants to do this. So check your privilege. So I appreciate you uplifting that you are grateful for the ability to work. I really appreciate that. Also, nice weather. Yes, grateful for that. I don't know where the sun went. It got all cloudy, but it was really nice. Yes, always have self-care, but being able to work is a blessing for sure. Thank you. Y'all keep uplifting what you're grateful for in the chat. We are going to move on in the agenda just for the sake of time, but definitely feel free to continue engaging in the chat. So, Brianna, I'm gonna pass it back to you.
Thank you. And yes, as Adriana said, please feel free to keep engaging in the chat because tonight is just a lot of questions to just facilitate this discussion around Second Chance Month and reentry awareness. So to get it started, just to reiterate again, the purpose of this in this conversation and just Second Chance Month, it's really aiming to help address this gap and like really helping to inform and highlight the many opportunities that are existing for those reentering into community. Whether it be community-based service providers, community-based organizations, friends, family, just to help build these meaningful second chances that are so important for people returning into community. So we just really wanted to take this moment to just raise awareness, but also really raise this awareness with each other and have these conversations, whether it be about the barriers to reentry, some resources that you may know that exist in your community to help reentry, what worked during reentry, what didn't work. So we're just really focusing on hearing all from you and your experiences. And we've come up with some questions to guide this discussion, but feel free to uplift anything that you feel is just important and also relates to this conversation, whether it be in the chat or coming off of mute. So I will have Adriana. Did you want to share? Okay. I'll have Adriana pull up the first question that we have for you all. So this first one is just kind of getting like a general idea of how many of you have experienced a form of reentry, whether it's yourself, loved ones, friends, just kind of getting that general idea. You can feel free to come off of mute or also share in the chat.
And also too, in thinking about this question, remember that reentry is not just coming home from quote unquote prison, right?
Mhm.
Reentry could also be coming home from county jail. Reentry could be coming home if you are a veteran or you have loved
Mhm.
ones who are veterans, right? Coming home from deployment and having to now re-enter society as a regular person, right? And that's what I think of when I think about reentry. I think about just the act of re-entering society after being removed from it for a period of time. So I already see a couple of things in the chat. And because we really want this to be like community and we want to be able to see folks, so we're going to share screen, share the question, and then we're going to unshare just so that we can see everybody. Because we also want to engage with this. But yeah, so we can also share the questions in the chat if that's helpful. So yeah, I see a couple of folks in the chat, and then I see Sherry has a hand raised. So go ahead, Sherry.
Well, I haven't experienced reentry yet, but I'm getting closer. And he just got his updated date, and then he was supposed to be getting home Thanksgiving before Thanksgiving in 28, and now it's going to be home before my birthday in 28. So it's very exciting. It's moved up to August. And to me, that's exciting. It's scary. A lot of things I'm going to have to learn between now and then, but it gives me hope.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and keep that because I think we have a couple of other questions later on that I think are gonna kind of tie into what you just said, right? Like that experience of like a lot to learn or even just understanding that process. So but yeah, that's exciting to hear though. Something to look forward to for sure. Crispy, go ahead.
Yeah, I love this discussion because it gives me so much hope. So with reentry, one of the guys from the Thousand Mile Running Club over at San Quentin, I was there for his release and for, within 48 hours of his release. And like it was as if, I said to him, does it feel like you're like a baby, like learning all the new things? And he's like, that's exactly what it feels like. So I was trying to help him learn how to use the phone. So he was gifted a backpack with a cell phone and some clothes and some things for his reentry from, I forget the name of the reentry organization. There are so many great reentry organizations, but just like trying to learn 20 years worth of technology in a very short amount of time is a really hard thing for people to do, to just like this whole concept of using, because some people haven't used cell phones inside the prisons and stuff like that. So that, and another friend from the running club helped him get clothing, new clothes and stuff like that, and just him trying to pick food out at a restaurant was just such a hard thing because not used to making any kind of decisions on their own and not having control. So there's a lot of this psychological stuff. There's all this, um, you know, coming into our society and learning all the things that have happened in the past 20 or so years. I mean, it's just so much. And I just really appreciate a lot of these reentry organizations that help people out because there's a lot that they need help with.
I love that. So thank you for sharing both Crispy and Sherry. But I want to call attention to a couple of things going on in the chat. So a couple folks have said, that their friends and their loved ones maybe are experiencing this, but not them. And so I really want to just again extend that like this is a community experience, right? Especially if it's your loved one or your family members going through it or a very close friend. We can also experience reentry the same way that we can experience incarceration with our loved ones. And so I know before I became incarcerated myself, I experienced my brother's incarceration because they were locked up and I was out here. But I was still, in a sense, doing that time with them, just like my mom always says, like, I'm doing the time with y'all. And so we're doing the time with folks even when they come home in reentry because it's still an adjustment. It's an adjustment for everybody. So I just want to validate everybody's experience when it comes to reentry, whether it's your personal journey or whether you're walking alongside somebody else who is on that journey. So I just wanted to validate that because it is important to remember, like, you are experiencing this too, just in a very different way. Medea, go ahead.
I think for me, just my process, seeing my family come home after a lot of years of incarceration, one thing that I like to take away and like really coach people on is to have grace with yourself and, you know, with the person coming home and in the transition process. You know, there's a lot of things that maybe were promised or wished, or, you know, their intentions were well, you know, during the transition process, but just give yourself grace. Everything doesn't come as fast as you like all the time. I mean, and I just, you know, that's one thing that I've learned throughout this process is really to just don't be hard on yourself. Everything comes in the right time, and to just make sure that you give yourself and others grace, because intentions are always well, but you know, sometimes you just don't meet those targets you had in the beginning of the process, right? So
I echo every single word. Thank you for that, Medea. All right, I'm gonna pass it back to Brianna so she can keep us going with sort of the next question. Oh, Ephraim.
I was trying to sit back and wait and like I wanted to hear everybody else, you know. Hi everybody. Let me turn my camera. I'm sorry. I'm over here like after 5, it's like, okay, I'm out. I'm clocking out. Hey everyone, Efrain Ortiz here. I'm the Inside Programs Associate with Initiate Justice. And just like you know, I think what you all said, just hearing what you all have been saying and just reading the chat as well, you know, it really touches me and something that Mireya said. Um really moved me because I think grace is so important, not only for ourselves. I'm formerly incarcerated, as you all know. I served 10 years in prison, and after the 10 years, it was scary. I did a lot of things to prepare myself, but I don't think that we could always and necessarily prepare ourselves for the community. I definitely leaned on my support system, my family, my loved ones, my partner. I wish she was here to share her experience because she practiced a lot of patience with me. So I you know, shout out to her for sure for that, because you know there was a lot of things I dealt with and a lot of struggles. I came out and I tried to jump into everything and wanted to help and give back, and you know, volunteering here, working here, and the one thing I finally sat down and it was a conversation, uh, a dinner conversation I had with a former lifer friend of mine that's home. Um, and he said, "You were doing everything that you're doing now while you were inside." He's like, "So what's changed?" He's like, "Because in there you were a clerk, you worked 8 hours, you did college, you did a bunch of self-help groups." He's like, "What's changed?" And I was like, "I don't know." And I go, like, "That's what I'm asking you." And I think was the self-care. And I think that's just so important, having that break to um to be with self. I used to make time, whether it was in the beginning before I left the cell or at the end of the night, to do something for myself, whether it was read, whether it was sit there and meditate, listen to music, whatever it was really take some time to reflect on my day or on my day the following day. And I stopped doing that because I was always busy trying to do the next thing, and then also be there with my family that was there throughout the 10 years to make time for them as well. So yeah, I definitely just burned myself out, and that's something that, you know, I'm so happy to hear so many people coming home. I know someone shared in the chat that their loved ones are coming home soon. So excited for that. And that's something that I always share with any of my friends that have came home since I've been home, is take the time. And all of them have that same mentality. No, it's because I want to do this and I got a full-time job, but I'm gonna see what else I'm gonna do another time. And I'm just like, oh my God, like I hear myself in them, and I just tell them, I remind them to take care of yourself, to slow down. You know, the work doesn't stop. You know, we're still gonna be there. We want to give back, but definitely make time for self, and then just be gracious. You know, I think we set goals I mean, like in general, I've realized, we all set goals and sometimes we may not accomplish them, but you know what? I tell people you're 10 steps further than you were before. You might not have hit that 12th step or whatever it was, or however many steps it was going to take you. But you know what? You're not walking backwards, and you're going forward. So just remind those coming home, and shout out to all of you in this community just for being there for your loved ones. It means a lot.
Amen, brother. No, in all seriousness though, no, seriously, I agree. And I agree with Oka as well as you being such an inspiration. So just congratulations on your growth. But as folks were kind of talking and even sharing in the chat, I was kind of hearing these dual things. And one of the things that I was also kind of hearing simultaneously folks speak about is a little bit of the challenge, right? The challenges that exist within reentry. And so that was sort of like also our next question, was to ask folks like, how have you experienced the challenges of reentry? Like, what has that been like for you or someone that you know? Or even like seeing the challenges that a loved one may be going through with reentry. Like, how does that make you feel? And like, yeah, what are those challenges? I saw Mireya's hand first, so go ahead.
Um, I think for me, I do, aside from, family coming home and experiencing these challenges, I also do social work, case management. And one of the biggest things that I see is the feeling of being let down by family members at home waiting for somebody. And you promised this, you promised that, you promised this, you said you were going to do this. And I try to explain to people that it's not that they didn't think that they were going to be able to do that. It's you have every intention to do that, except coming home and actually applying it. A lot of times those skills or what they verbalized were not skills they actually had, but what they've learned by seeing other people say they've done, or in movies, or from whoever they're incarcerated with for umpteen years, right? So that's the right thing to say. That's the right thing to say you're going to do, or what you've been taught stereotypically you should come home and do to feel successful or to feel like you're doing well. And I think that being able to remind yourself that the intentions again were there, and if it doesn't happen when you come home, there is another route for you, right? So not feeling like you let somebody down. And yes, relapse is huge. A lot of those things that you want to come home thinking you're going to master, it's okay if it doesn't happen in that time. And really realizing that a lot of that, what you mentioned earlier, Adriana, like learning a lot of these things early on, right? When you come home, I know Crispy mentioned somebody learning a cell phone. A lot of people, it's driver's license, right? They probably drove without a license for umpteen years. The driver's license, looking for somewhere to stay. What does that even look like? Paying bills. So it's a lot, it's overwhelming. And I just really want to recognize that those things, although they sounded very well planned out, once you're home, just really realizing that it has to be a good support system in order for you to be successful and for you to get the resources that you need. So I'm glad we're here as one of those when people come home.
Absolutely. As you were talking today, one of the things that I was thinking about, like my own experience of just not even like my experience as an incarcerated person or formerly incarcerated person, but it's like I have been in this cycle of like reentry since I was probably 4 years old. With my oldest brother's incarceration and then having him come home, and then second oldest going in, so like on this revolving door. And I always felt like when I was a kid, it wasn't something that I could talk about. Like it wasn't something that was addressed. I couldn't talk about it. It's like swept under the rug, just come home and keep on going. And I remember always feeling like I needed to talk about it and feeling frustrated like I couldn't talk about it. And so I think that's also another challenge with reentry when it comes to like youth and young people and kiddos, is having that space to be able to talk about like, oh, my dad just came home, or my sister or my brother or whomever it is, and what that feels like for them. Because I also remember like struggling with like trying to reconnect. And my siblings are, significantly older than me, but still like not understanding how to connect or how to be when somebody comes home, and is experienced incarceration. So like for me, that's also been a challenge that I've noticed like in my own life. Even with other family members, when I came home, it's like this weird, like we can't talk about it. We can't talk about it. And so it's hard to reconnect because this huge thing that has happened in someone's life is like, we don't talk about it. So I think that's also one of the challenges, is just like, again, like I think we've come a long way from removing stigma, right? And we have such wonderful community spaces now where we can talk about these things. But I'm always wondering, like, can we do more? Is there more we could be doing? To create more spaces so that these types of challenges exist less and less. Sherry.
I just have a couple questions for those of you that have had successful reentry and are getting back into a semi-normal life, if any of us have one. But how difficult is it for you to leave it's like a cocoon prison? It's horrible, but you don't have to make too many decisions, and you don't have to deal with outside stressors, and you don't have to deal with like technology and stuff on a big basis. And I'm just wondering how difficult it is to come back into that kind of a atmosphere. What things helped you the most that family members did that would help you feel comfortable again? Because it has to be different. I mean, you were saying, a friend, that it was you felt like you were not giving yourself time because you were trying to do everything right and be successful in your eyes of your family and do all these things. Basically, you're trying to make up for what you did, right? And I don't want that to become a trap when my son comes home. So I'm wondering, how do you move past that mindset of not having a lot of responsibility to all of a sudden having total responsibility for yourself and possibly other people?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in here. And I'm just reading Angelica's comments on the chat, and she's just like hitting all angles, like, you know what I mean? I feel to like put it all in like in a bubble or plainly, I think is what we're doing here. Having that support system. This is my internet. You guys can hear me, right? For me, it was one of the biggest challenges I think I faced was trying to express what I was going through to my family, to my partner, to my loved ones that have never been incarcerated before. I can explain it to them, but I never felt they understood, and they were very empathetic, and they were there for me. And I think that's the beauty of uh what I tell people now that so many people have come home is finding a community that can initiate justice, where you do have formerly incarcerated people that have experienced it firsthand there, and that's who I leaned on. I think Angelica mentioned something about, like, leaving the people behind inside and wanting to be back in that space. And it wasn't necessarily wanting to be back in prison, because hell no, I don't want to be back in prison. But I met so many great individuals inside, who I created a bond with, a friendship with. I call them my brothers. And honestly are more my friends than some of my best friends from childhood. Um, so I think it's having those small circles also to lean on, because you can speak with someone that relates, that can really understand you, even though our family and loved ones are, like I said, they're there. You all are there for us. My partner was there for me, but I just never felt she understood. My brother was there for me. I never felt he understood, because he's never experienced incarceration. And I know you all do the time with us, just like you guys have to navigate reentry with us. and I know they had to, and that's why I said, patience. So yeah, to put it all in a bubble, I would say just having this support system, right? Because anxiety is going to come, depression is going to come, that fear of relapse is going to come. All of these things I've dealt with. Sometimes I want to I've had points in my since I've been home where I want to throw my hands up and say screw it. Um, and then I ground myself. And it's also the work we put inside. Um, I always remind people, and I used to remind people when I facilitated groups inside, is people would always say inside to me, "Oh, when I get home, I'm going to do this. When I get home, I'm going to do this." And it's like, no, you don't wait till you get home. You start the internal change inside. And so that's how you learn how taking these self-help groups, taking all these groups and understanding those triggers, because the triggers are going to come and the triggers happen inside. We get tested all the time in different situations. So learning how to navigate through those triggers is easy. I think Angelica said something about being around a whole lot of people. I'm a hardcore Dodger fan, that you all that know me. And going to a Dodger game for the first time was like, oh my, what did I do? There were just so many people and just so much things going on. And then, like, people drinking or whatever and bumping into me. And those were little small triggers, but it was still a trigger. And it was like not challenging myself not to feed into that, or not to, even though they didn't say excuse, they were rude or whatever it was, you know, road rage, we see it all the time, those type of things, and understanding those triggers and learning how to cope with those triggers and deal with those, I think is very important. That's something that I began from the inside, and it's something I constantly still work on, because I'm human. I fail. There's some situations throughout the day that I don't handle appropriately, and I have to take ownership of that, apologize, and understand where I went wrong.
Yeah, totally agree with everything Ephraim said. I think for me, what stood out to me about your question, Sherry, was the not having the outside stressors. And I think for me, it was very, very different. I had a lot of outside stressors. Um, I was just powerless to do anything about it. So I think it's different. We still have the same concerns, and we still have choices that we have to make every day. I think, even for me, um, very hot-headed, very angry before I got locked up, did not have an issue throwing these hands around. Um, and I think for me, the choices that I struggled with while I was inside was, do I react or don't I react? Do I lose my date? Do I not lose my date? And even when I came home, it was still very much the same thing of like, do I react or do I get a violation? Um, and so it's still like those choices. I think they're just different. Um, and I think for me, one of the biggest things that was a help to me during my reentry was like the same thing as Medea said, Ephraim said, was like the support. I think that if I did not have just people in my corner just rooting for me and not necessarily like trying to control my every move, or like even to my parole officers who weren't like down my neck, but they were just like in my corner, gave me the space to like figure it out. And I think that was the biggest help for me. Other people may need a little bit more hands-on, but I think that's where communication comes in, is like, what do you need in this journey? How can I support you through this? And yeah, that's what was helpful for me in my reentry, was just folks giving me the space to figure it out, because it's hard to come home, and I only did 5 years. And so I couldn't imagine doing more than that. Like, 5 years was enough for me, and it's still hard 9 years later. To where I think somebody talked about, the idea of like missing the inside. It's like very real. Every once in a while, I'm like, God, I could just be in there and be cool. But it has more to do with that community that I created in there, and knowing that the community that you did create, people are going to have your back, and not let you do anything stupid, right? And so I think it's closer inside. Out here, it's like we're so spread out, and I think that's a part of the like just wanting to go back. Everything's right here. I love the conversations going on in the chat too, by the way. Okay, we have a couple more questions that we want to ask folks. This is a really rich conversation. I love it. I think it's very, very powerful. I think folks are walking away with some gems tonight. But as you know, we are a policy organization. So every conversation we have, there's a purpose, there's a reason, there's a strategy. We're not just asking y'all these questions just for giggles and bubbles, right? We're not doing that. So this next question is really, it's kind of twofold. Again, we are a policy organization. So everything that we discuss, things that y'all talk about, the challenges that exist, some things are more interpersonal, but I think there's also challenges that exist within the system of reentry, parole, probation, etc., that we still need to change, right? And I think one of those things could be like an example of gate money, right? That is something that we could change, let folks get out with a little bit more than $200, because $200 ain't doing nothing in 2024. Now with these gas prices, eggs, everything, it's crazy. And so there's a lot of movement that can be done, policy work that can still be done around reentry stuff. So we want to hear from y'all. Let me share the question. Let me share my screen. Okay. So the question is, what policy changes or community initiatives would address gaps or make meaningful impact in reentry support? And we want to know what y'all think. And again, this could be, there's no right or wrong answer here. There's no right or wrong answer. We're brainstorming. These are just ideas that we have. And that's how all bills start. All bill acts start with an idea. Somebody thinks of something. And so again, the question is, what policy changes or community initiatives? So even if it's not a statewide policy, but just what is something that you would like to see in your community that would address a gap or make a meaningful impact in reentry support? I can model an answer here. And for me, I think something that would be great to implement as like a policy, maybe not a state law, but implement it as like a CDCR policy. I don't know how well that would work. But I think what's needed is there's a lot of trauma-informed care that is missing from reentry support in general. So there's a lot of different providers who are doing trauma-informed care with folks in reentry, but there's still a lot of missing pieces. So for example, part of my experience is I'm also a victim. I've experienced gender-based violence, and it's directly related to my incarceration. And so coming home, trying to find a safe space that was also geared toward reentry, where I could process a lot of those feelings and emotions and things that I wasn't able to do while I was inside, wasn't able to do so, wasn't able to successfully find a place that successfully molded those beautiful things together, reentry and trauma-informed care. At least not in my neck of the woods, which is San Joaquin County, Central Valley. So that is something that I would like to see implemented either as a community initiative or a policy change to fill that gap in reentry support. Anna, I see your hand, and then I also see lots of stuff going in the chat, and we are capturing all of these things in notes. So I just want to let folks know. Go ahead, Anna.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to elevate that further with like the reentry program. Sometimes like when you're on parole or probation, you're expected to go into like taking like anger management or group programs. But all these programs are from like the early 90s, like late 80s, and like they're so outdated, and they're not very supportive and not like safe for folks, or like folks don't feel safe to like be able to just like share, so creating like safer spaces where people can come together, share like grief, a lot of grief counseling too. I feel like it's very important, especially like when you're inside and like you lose a loved one and you can't really process it through because you're going through everything else that you're going through while you're in there, and then you come home and you're still dealing with that trauma. and so having those spaces is very important, and just like updating the support that's given, that's actually beneficial in people. And also, and then last thing, empowering folks to create their own spaces, you know. So how you were mentioning, it's like, okay, I needed this, you know, so it's like, okay, how can we create this? And, you know, would you like to lead it, you know? Or do you know somebody who, you know, could role model this for us? And that way it's like giving back to your own community. Or it's like, oh, how can I come back and like volunteer, like have paid, you know, love that word, you know, getting paid for it, and feeling like you're fulfilling, you know, you're giving back to the community too.
I love that. Plus 10 million on that. We had a trauma recovery center out here in Stockton. And it was, unfortunately, it was attached to an organization that's no longer in existence. And so it's an unfortunate loss for this community out here in Stockton in the Central Valley. Because that was really the only recovery center that existed for folks specifically impacted by incarceration. So we definitely need more spaces like that for sure. And I love the idea of teaching people how to create these spaces, right? More access for folks and more education and awareness on how to start, you know, maybe your own nonprofit, or maybe it's not a nonprofit, maybe it's just a regular business, but your business is to heal people, right? In a community way. So love it. Any other ideas or things that you would like to see policy changes or community initiatives? And I welcome folks to think back to like the challenges that folks have addressed, or maybe you've seen in your own like communities, like folks in reentry or your loved ones. I know some folks don't have said that they don't necessarily have anybody who's experienced reentry quite yet. But yes, so I see a question. Can an incarcerated person create these spaces in the prisons? So yes and no, Ephraim. I don't know if you have any insight there as well. But I know we can start sort of like these in prison like groups. But they have to have sponsors and things like that. But you know, we can always meet on the yard. We can always meet on the yard and create our own little thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sanctioned event, but it can be created. But there's a lot of red tape. Angelica says in Santa Clara County, I've heard of the reentry lived experience. Yeah, I've heard about them too. So the lived experience advisory board is really, really good. I haven't done a lot of work with them, but I did a little bit a couple years ago, and I really kind of respect the work that they do and the approach that they take and how they identify themselves as lived experience experts. I used to identify myself that way, and I haven't for a while, and I've been thinking, I was like, I need to go back to that. And then how do other folks view this? So Precious, are you meaning like how do other folks view like reentry or the challenges to reentry? Is that what your question was? Like when you say how do other inmates or incarcerated folks view this? Oka, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love this conversation. Two things are coming up for me. One is the Heart Center's vision is to have a retreat center outside of LA, about 60 to 90 minutes, where people who are impacted by incarceration directly or through a loved one have access to, you know, a beautiful retreat center that's also created by people who are impacted by incarceration. And so there's a couple folks who are inside actually drawing up the retreat center for us. I think energetically that would be like, you know, it's like powerful for people who are like in the system to create it. And then the other vision is to give people access to retreats abroad, maybe like a 5 to 7 day retreat that's abroad. If they feel called to, give them access to a passport and just support them with the whole 9 yards, the ride to the airport, you know. And I think, yeah, access and exposure. I love that. This is such a powerful conversation too, in a dialogue. And Adriana, I loved how you also included, re-entry for people who are impacted by jail. Something I'm diving into myself is like, I was arrested when I was a child in Alabama, and I think I had like suppressed that. And like all the other times I was arrested when I was a child, because my dad is arrested and he's incarcerated and he currently has LWOP. And so, yeah, we're really these like multi-dimensional people, and so we're not just one story, we're all of the things that we are. Yeah, so I just love this. Also, it feels like we're vision casting, which is really beautiful, and we're imagining the future and how powerful our thoughts are, because everything in the room or the space that we're in was created with a thought or an idea. And so, yeah, this is powerful work. I just want to say thank you. And if anyone else wants to hop in or support the Heart Center in any way, that's our intention, is to provide individuals who are impacted by incarceration with access to healing in a very innovative way. One of the things we're working on is an app to bring on the tablets of people that are in prison, so they can click on it and have access to live guided meditation, at least 4 every day, to be in community, and it would be accessible to CDCR officers and people outside, and a couple other innovative projects as well. But thank you. I'll drop in the Instagram too. Thanks for asking, Precious.
I love it. I also love, I agree with you, Oka. I think we definitely very much are vision casting, because that's what we do, right? We can't end incarceration without first creating the vision for ending incarceration, right? So I want to pass it back to Brown. I'm going to pass it back to you to kind of ask this next question. It's slide number 7. And it kind of feeds along to this, but just to kind of keep the conversation going. So I'm going to share. But Brianna, if you want to lead folks in this question.
Yeah, absolutely. So this next question is kind of similar to what we've been talking about, but just kind of beyond those issues. So what other issues should we be talking about as it relates to reentry? So for example, intersectionality, it's not very talked about with this issue, and there's not really many resources. Well, there are, but they're not really, as we said, brought to light, and they're not that accessible, and they're not exposed to community. So I think that's a big issue of it as well. I can also put it in the chat.
Yeah, I think it's similar to the same, right? Just more of the other things that we should be talking about as it relates to reentry. I think definitely houselessness should be included in the conversations that we talk about when we talk about reentry, right? That should not be removed. I definitely think we should be talking about immigration when we talk about reentry, right? I think that our community members who are maybe undocumented or who are fleeing terrible things in their homelands and coming here, I think that's a form of reentry, right? They have to re-enter a completely different society, a completely different culture. And so what's that like, and how are we holding space for those folks who may be coming home from going through reentry as a form of you were in an immigration detention center and now you've been released, right? So what does that intersection look like? And so I think there's a lot of issues that we should be talking about as it relates to reentry. I think maybe it's not many issues, and maybe it's just maybe we just need to be talking more about intersectionality, what that means and why it's important. Does everybody here know the concept of intersectionality? And we're almost done. We have a few more minutes and then we're gonna let folks go. But intersectionality is a huge thing. It's why Initiate Justice does what we do. We look at everything with an intersectional lens, and believe in leaving nobody behind. And so I think that's one of the things, again, that we can No, what's that? I'm not familiar. Yes, I love it. Intersectionality basically means kind of like how Oka mentioned before she dropped out, not dropped out, left the meeting, that we all live at different intersections of life, right? Like I'm not just an employee, right? But I'm also like someone's daughter, I'm someone's sister, I'm formerly incarcerated, I'm a woman, but I'm a Black woman, but I'm also somebody that lives in the Central Valley, right, as opposed to a more progressive area. So there's all these different intersections that we live at, right? We hold multiple identities at one point in time. And so that's what it means to look at something through an intersectional lens is like where do these roads meet, right? Incarceration is one road, but it intersects with homelessness. It intersects with education. It intersects with gender-based violence. It intersects with community violence, right? It intersects with so many other issues because we know when we talk to folks who have been impacted by incarceration, we ask what they've experienced. It's a plethora of things: child abuse, adult abuse, elder abuse, threats, violence, fraud. It could be a million things, right? And so there's a lot of different things. And basically, that's essentially what that means, Cliff Notes version. But I can drop in the chat a really good YouTube video for intersectionality. I have to take a second to find it. But we're at 7:43. So Brianna, wondering if you could kind of move us into our close. And with this next slide of reflecting on reentry awareness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the resources and stuff like that.
Yeah. So this last question, it's kind of something that we want you all to walk away with and just like really think about. So rather than answering it now, maybe something that you all can reflect on and just kind of take that into this month since it's super important. And there's going to be a lot of conversation around just reentry awareness. And we just like really wanted to take like an imaginative approach to this and think kind of big. So the question is, reflecting on Second Chance Awareness Month, how would you reimagine reentry in your community and what would you want it to look like? So in a perfect world, what would reentry look like for you, for your community, for your loved ones, and how would you really like want that to look like? And I think that's something important to walk away with and think about as you support yourself through this journey, support your loved ones, your friends. So that's just something that we really want you all to kind of just reflect on and walk away with. I can also put the question in the chat. Oh, thank you, Adriana.
And I just dropped into the chat. It's a YouTube video. It's a TED Talk, so it's a little longer. But it's a TED Talk by a woman named Kimberly Crenshaw, who actually coined the term intersectionality. So if folks are interested in diving in and learning more about that, links in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Adriana. And then I put that question in the chat. We'll also be following up with that in the recap email. And then while you all walk away with this question, we also wanted to just share some really important resources in terms of reentry. We'll be sharing them in the recap email with a lot of links to these websites, these resources. So some will address reentry services for Black and Brown, transgender, gender variant, intersex individuals. Some provide job support for reentry individuals, educational support, wraparound services. So whether that includes therapy, legal services, educational support, supplemental income support. There's also workforce programs for reentry populations and just other organizations to check out that may be useful for whatever the situation is. So really like acknowledging that intersectional piece and whatever you may need at that time for reentry. These are just some organizations, but we'll be following up with these in the recap email. And there's also such an abundance more, whether it be like in your community, also just in LA, California as a whole. So definitely like be sure to keep an eye out on that, and we'll always be like sharing these types of resources, but we'll be sure to follow up with these resources as well. And then Adriana, I'm not sure if there's anything you wanted to add before I share links.
No, nothing I want to add. Just wanted to quickly uplift Anna. I see your chat. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. Sending so much love to you and your loved one. It is a rough road. But we are here for you. If you need community, please feel free to reach out to me. If you need any resources or anything like that, or just like a listening ear. I'm also happy to touch bases with my colleagues or anything like that to make sure that y'all get the support that you need, because it definitely is hard adjusting, especially if you haven't been, especially reentering society after such a long time.
Excuse me, I had a statement before we go. I just put in the chat that there's a new LA City, LA County app came out called WIN, when means what I need. It's on the menu, it has everything on there: shelter, food, clothing, transportation, education, vocation, occupation, legal, medical, miscellaneous, utilities, even insurance. It's magnificent app that just came out, probably the last 3 or 4 months. Put it in the chat called WIN. I want to address the other point earlier, talking about intersection of immigrants versus prison. They have I'm Dr. Shun. They have a shitload of federal and state laws on the books, mainly federal laws, immigration, some federal constitution, not state. And they have a million resources that's above what prisons get. In California, because we're in the richest state in the union, California has more resources than any other state. Get out here. Half the states in America don't even get nowhere near what California did as far as resources, especially if you're in a big county like Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego. County more stuff to get. Anyway, my point is that immigration, they get way more stuff than what a prison gets, because prisons are still dealing with the stigma of the incarceration in society. They probably don't really recognize the redemption that you go through, retribution, restitution,
yeah, thank you for dropping that information. That's apps like that are super helpful and critical because it allows people to like take in their reentry like right at their fingertips without having to go to and fro. So thank you so much for that. Thank you also to Angelica for dropping CEO Works in the chat. I also dropped another resource in the chat, Project Protocol. This app was actually worked on by one of our outside organizers, and he also works for Initiate Justice Action, Emiliano. So definitely explore those resources. Thanks y'all for dropping those into the chat. But yeah, nothing else from me, Brianna. I think you can take us into our official like closeout.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for tonight's conversation. It was really just like rich and productive. And I'm like really happy that it went like that. And we all could be in space to talk about these resources and just reentry as a whole. It's a really important topic. And I'm glad that we can all be in community and discuss this and relate with one another. So we'll definitely be continuing to have conversations like this. But thank you. And as we close, as always, we want to uplift some more meeting spaces for you all to be in space with us again. So as Adriana mentioned, we'll be having our April committee meeting at the end of the month on the April 24th. We're going to continue that regional discussion. Also be probably sharing more reentry resources by region too. That's something that we definitely want to dive into, just sharing resources among regions. And then, as always, our next member meeting will take place on Wednesday, May 1st at 6:30. Those links will be dropped in the chat. And then don't forget to RSVP if you are available and want to attend our Mother's Day brunch on May 11th. And be sure to keep an eye out for those emails, as we're going to be sharing more information about the event as it comes. But once again, thank you all so much. It was a really good discussion, and it was just really nice to hear from you all. And I appreciate you all for contributing to the discussion. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, y'all. Same sentiments, exactly. Really appreciate y'all hanging out with us and sharing your thoughts, challenges, barriers, whatever. Because again, we're reimagining stuff. So take this conversation with you, bless somebody with it. The recording for this will be up on our YouTube page sometime next week. So be on the lookout for that. And you'll also receive the link and everything in the recap email that goes out. So make sure to sign up for our email list because that's the only way you're going to get the recap email. But other than that, before we leave, again, just wanted to say thank you. Appreciate y'all so much. Happy Second Chance Month. Happy National Reentry Awareness Month. Please continue to share resources and please continue to show up for one another as community and be kind to yourselves and give yourselves grace as well. So thanks, y'all. Have a good night.